Well, good afternoon and welcome from my side. My name is Kilian Krone, here to present today a couple of lessons learned from the German National Hydrogen Strategy. And it's a very big honor to be here virtually at the ICCI event as part of our activities as the German Energy Agency. And over the next about half an hour, I will give you a bit of a briefing on what we did there's a feedback now. Okay, I'll just be my speaker. Apologies. I will give you some introductions about what we have been doing in the past in Germany for the National Hydrogen Strategy, but also where the current discussion is going in improving and updating this strategy for the development of hydrogen in the energy sector. So welcome on board for the next 30 minutes. And before we go very much into detail on hydrogen, let me just shortly introduce the German Energy Agency, DENA. German Energy Agency is a government-owned organization working on all aspects of the energy transition as a think tank, as an implementer of projects, and also specifically tasked for Turkey to lead on behalf of the German government the bilateral energy partnership between Turkey and Germany. And in this capacity, we are also speaking here today and looking very much forward. Yeah, my role within DENA is to lead their efforts, or our efforts, on international cooperation in hydrogen. And specifically, Turkey is, from our German perspective, a very attractive country for the use of hydrogen. Even so attractive that we set out last year to develop a joint study together with Schou Energy Transition Center, a think tank that you may know, and Bilkent University, with the main question of where and how can we see first hydrogen projects happening, and where can we make them economically viable in the very first place. So one of the key results of this study is this map that you can see here on the left-hand side, where we looked at all the different regions in Turkey and tried to see where do we have the best potential for renewable energy, where do we have infrastructures in place, and where do we have off-takers. And a very clear picture emerged that in the short term, the most suitable regions are in Western Turkey, where the big population centers are, where the very good wind offshore and wind onshore potentials are for Turkey, and where we can make a short-term impact on energy transition in Turkey is in those regions. You can find the study, in fact, online on the website of the Schou Energy Transition Center, and we would be very welcome to exchange with you on the results of the study and get into discussions. We also created some scenarios of what the role for hydrogen could be in Turkey. That was important for us as German cooperation partners to assess the potential for hydrogen for the substitution of natural gas, for example, but also potentially as an export commodity in Turkey, and was a very starting point, essentially, for our activities in the German-Turkish cooperation. Now, knowing that in Turkey a hydrogen strategy development is on its way, let me provide some insights on the hydrogen strategy in Germany. Our hydrogen strategy, I think, was one of the first ones to be launched, not quite as early as the Japanese with in 2017-18 when they did their first hydrogen strategy, but launched in June 2020, so just about in the same time frame as the European hydrogen strategy. In preceding this strategy were 2 years of intense discussions with a lot of industrial stakeholders and all the relevant ministries, such that we came to formulate a national hydrogen strategy in this time frame. And on the goals and ambitions, I think it's very clear to say that we have hydrogen as a key pillar of the energy system, to establish it as an alternative energy carrier, a new energy carrier, you could say, because the current demand for hydrogen is basically only petrochemical industry and the ammonia production in Germany. So it's a new carrier for other applications and to make hydrogen competitive in the larger energy system. And there's a third element, and that I think we share with the Japanese hydrogen strategy very much. We are looking to develop a domestic market, but also an international market aimed at exporting hydrogen to Germany. And that is really a very important aspect because currently in Germany, we import the majority of final energy used from abroad, from even outside of the European Union. And going towards climate neutrality in 2045, which is the German goal, means that we have to substitute all of these quantities of energy, of coal, of gas and oil, into green molecules. And we believe those green molecules will not be biomass because we don't have sufficient amounts, but they will be based on hydrogen. And that's the background that we chose in Germany for the national hydrogen strategy. So very clear focus on imports and also, of course, a focus of technology exports because the German government believes that there are a lot of German companies who have very strong products across the value chain for hydrogen. Now let's look a bit deeper into the German hydrogen strategy, and you will find there are very specific goals for national production and import. We will see them later. But also there's a huge amount of funding allocated because I think we can say we got a bit lucky in timing that when the hydrogen strategy was launched, it was just in the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And it was relatively easy, I think, to find new funding and new stimulus under the backdrop of economic stimulus packages that were anyways being drafted at the time. We will see a bit more on governance and the action plan, but there is a very defined structure of the implementation and continuous refinement of the measures. And there's also 38 measures that list very clearly how to follow up with the market ramp up. So essentially, it's a strategy that already contains a bit of a roadmap. 3 sectors are in particular focus, and that is the chemical industry and steel making. Both of them could use hydrogen in very large quantities. The chemical industry already does it. And for steel making, which is currently based on coke in Germany, mainly could switch to direct reduction of iron ore and thereby substitute coal and use hydrogen in the future. Second aspect of hydrogen is clearly transportation. But not only a fuel cell electric vehicles. The focus of the hydrogen strategy, in fact, is even more on aviation and maritime transport. These are the areas where we know that electrification and battery vehicles and vessels is not feasible. So those will see a very large use of hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives such as synthetic hydrocarbons and ammonia and so on. The third sector that is very crucial to German efforts is the heating sector. We know that heat pumps are the most efficient way to provide heat from efficiency point of view, but also in Germany, the majority of homes are powered or are heated by gas boilers, and those cannot directly be electrified in every case. Let's look a bit further at the goals. And what I personally find is impressive is the ambition and audacity of the goals that we see already for 2030. The government estimates that we will have a low carbon hydrogen demand of around 100 terawatt hours per year. That would be about double what we currently have as a regular, so to say, gray hydrogen demand, largely provided by steam methane reforming. So we are looking at 100 terawatt hours by 2030, and these 100 terawatt hours are also broadly in line with the majority of energy system modeling studies in Germany. So the scientists do seem to agree. Out of these roughly 100 terawatt hours, there will be a part that is supplied by domestic production of green hydrogen through initially 5 gigawatts of electrolyzers to be installed in Germany by 2030. Now, the new government that we have since autumn last year has revised this target upwards and now says that we should have 10 gigawatts of electrolyzers, which would mean something in the tune of 30 terawatt hours to be provided in green hydrogen from domestic production. This implies obviously a huge gap, and the gap is also very clearly again provided by imports from countries that have better conditions in producing hydrogen, either because they have access to fossil energy and CCS sources, blue hydrogen, or because they have better availability of land and capacity factors essentially for wind and photovoltaics. And you've probably noticed the German government signing agreements with Australia, with engaging conversations with Saudi Arabia, with Namibia and Chile. So the German government is already very active bilaterally on fostering relations. And we will see later also funding programs to fund and supply this gap of around 80 terawatt hours by 2030. Now, all of this is just the beginning. Most analysts seem to agree that we will have between 600 and 900 terawatt hours of low carbon hydrogen demand by 2045. Let me introduce to you the governance of the German hydrogen strategy. It was very important for the German government to achieve two things. That is, provide coherence within the government, within the relative ministries. And the second one is to bring the industry and all other relevant stakeholders on board. That is why at the core of the implementation efforts on the hydrogen strategy, you find the National Hydrogen Council. Those are representatives that are named, invited by the government to provide strategic guidance on a range of specific questions. And you find there CEOs of energy companies, as well as think tanks and civil society organizations. So I think this is very important to understand that the government's plan took a broad approach in trying to implement the German hydrogen strategy as a consensus project with all the relevant stakeholders. There's also coordination and monitoring efforts in place. Some of them are also run by DENA, but also run by other organizations that work directly with the government. Overall, there are state secretaries as representatives of the relevant ministries who are providing strategic guidance on these efforts. Let's maybe look a bit deeper into the hydrogen strategy. I already mentioned there are 38 measures and 9 billion euros that have been allocated for the next 3 years to provide the initial stage of a market ramp up, to create a market from essentially zero to essentially 100 terawatt hours per year. They target a variety of fields, that being the production of hydrogen, application fields, infrastructure and supply, the research and innovation, as well as action on the EU level and international market development. I think this is just to say that we have a very broad range of topics that we work on. There's also first infrastructure, hydrogen infrastructure that will be implemented in Germany, connecting different regions. But at the moment, let's focus on the 2 billion euros on the international aspect and the opportunities that arise also for Turkey. Overall, there are 4 core funding instruments that have been devised and are being implemented by the German government. The 3 ones that are highlighted in blue here, they are either in operation or will be in operation very soon. The funding guideline, the second instrument that is mentioned here, is unfortunately already finished, or is already has been completed the first round of this procedure. the funding guideline aimed at directly providing capital grants to international projects of, let's say, medium size for hydrogen, so in the double-digit million euros in funding volumes. And this funding guideline may be repeated, but at the moment there's no definite answer on this yet. So let's focus on the other three mechanisms, and I think the most, I could even say famous one is the H2 Global mechanism. It's a market incentive mechanism that compensates the price difference between the cost of production and the current market price for green hydrogen products. And I think this is a very important approach. We will also learn about that later, but the basic idea is that the government just funds the gap and thereby provides certainty to potential suppliers of hydrogen, and guarantees a certain price without stepping in too much or interfering too much on the business side of things. And I think this idea of contracts for difference as a de-risking instrument for project finance is very crucial. In fact, we as DENA did a survey of all the funding mechanisms that are currently being undertaken by governments worldwide. We surveyed over 30 countries with over 100 mechanisms for hydrogen. And the only mechanism in this way that we came across is actually the one by the German government. And I think it's an approach that also other governments could follow at relatively low prices to work with the contract for difference mechanism. Now, the interesting bit about this contract for difference mechanism is that it will auction the physical delivery of hydrogen derivatives to the European market. And that could be methanol, that could be ammonia, that could be synthetic kerosene. They will auction this for a time period with a fixed quantity and fixed price for 10 years. And we certainly believe that this security, the German government as an off-taker with fixed prices and fixed quantities, can make hydrogen projects bankable in a very short run. And I think this is what's lacking if we are looking at the current space of project developments in Europe and worldwide. The first round for H2 Global hasn't started yet, but it will likely in the course of this year. So I invite you to keep checking their website regularly and just see where this mechanism is developing. It also looks like that the mechanism might be applied to other circumstances as well in other world regions by other funding institutions. Now, thirdly, the fund, the Hydrogen Fund for International Projects. The German government is currently on its way to devise a fund similar to the activities that existing development banks and multilateral institutions are providing for the energy sector for regular project finance as a investor in equity or as someone providing bonds and thereby through these blended finance instruments contributing to lower capital costs. A similar approach will be taken for the fund. The Hydrogen Fund that is still underway, likely in cooperation with the German development bank KfW. Fourth instrument is H2UP. H2UP is currently running. It is, however, not clear yet whether it will be applicable for Turkey or not. It's a program that targets and supports the project scouting, so the early phases, feasibility studies, in strategic partner countries with funding of up to 200,000 euros per project. And I think it's an excellent opportunity, especially when projects are at very early stages and need funding to develop the first ideas and approaches. Towards the end of my presentation, let me conclude a little bit what we have learned, or what I think that we have learned over the last 2 years of hydrogen strategy, 2 years of implementation or step-by-step implementation that we've done. And I think the first remark on this must be that the last 3 weeks have really changed a lot of things, not only in Germany, but globally in the energy transition. We have a new emphasis on energy security. You have all probably seen last week's announcement by the European Commission with the Repower EU, a declaration that clearly states that green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, have a big role next to energy efficiency in increasing energy security for Europe. And this, in combination with the EU Green Deal, the new German government with a green energy minister, I think has led to increased ambitions when it comes to hydrogen. That's very important to say, that the initial goals that we thought about and also the initial speed of implementation won't be enough anymore. I think we've also seen that a lot of discussion on the hydrogen backbone in Europe will likely be accelerated as a result of this, at least for the current German government. There will be a focus on creating a continental European hydrogen transmission grid, and that will be key in establishing also an international market for at least gaseous energy carriers based on hydrogen. What's also clear is that this comes at a price. So we now know that in the initial stages of hydrogen, there will be a couple of billions at least lacking to unlock investments that are even larger. The German government is very committed and might increase their commitments in an update of the hydrogen strategy. Currently on infrastructure, for example, there is already a clear, what we call a start grid, initial grid of maybe 1,500 kilometers that will be built in Germany. But I think it's already clear that this may not be enough as an implementation in the course of the next maybe 5 years in Germany. So ambitions are very clear and are moving very fast. We also know that in a lot of regulatory areas, we need amendments and refinements. But I think that would be too complex of a conclusion for this format as a keynote. But we can certainly say that there are a lot of laws, a lot of regulations that need updating as part of the update of the hydrogen strategy. On the import side, we now know that this H2 global mechanism that I spent a lot of time explaining is a key component of our import strategy. But with regards to our new and accelerated timeline, we need even more action, immediate action on establishing supply of green and blue hydrogen from abroad. You've probably noted the visit of the German energy minister in Norway just 2 days ago, where increased cooperation on blue hydrogen has been a topic. And I think that further measures will be needed to stay in track of the targets, not only the hydrogen targets, but also emissions targets, especially with the new ramp up of coal-fired power stations that looks likely to continue for the next months. Then maybe some further basic regulatory decisions that have to be enhanced. And I think that is a question of where to use hydrogen, how to finance hydrogen projects, and which sectors to prioritize. The last 1.5, 2 years, even after the publishing of the hydrogen strategy, there was still a lot of energy spent in the German energy community by industry and government stakeholders in trying to define where to use first the hydrogen and how to create proper offtake mechanisms. And I think in that regard, we've come a bit further. We now have, especially with the new guidance from the European Union and the increased emergency in getting off from natural gas, we know that there are very good solutions for the residential heat market and for low temperature heat applications in general. And that electrification is the fastest way in decreasing dependence on natural gas, and also maybe not the immediate way of the use of low carbon hydrogen. So I think the current consensus in the discussion seems to be to go for an adaptation of the national hydrogen strategy, focusing more on no regret applications. Unfortunately, those no regret applications include the industry, especially steel industry and the chemical industry. And those are the ones that are in international competition with companies in China, the US, and elsewhere who may not have the same climate ambition. So I think we also know from the discussions about a carbon border adjustment mechanism on EU level that further support will be needed. They are the ones who could be the first and fastest off-takers of hydrogen, but they have the least financial incentives to do it. In the transport sector, the focus on aviation and shipping remains, and accompanying EU legislation has been passed. We've seen the first synthetic kerosene plant opening in Germany last year. So there is a lot of activity happening there. And we see a focus shift for hydrogen more as an enabler of keeping grid stability in periods where renewables cannot provide all of the electricity needs. So I think there is a bit of a shift of thinking. There's also a shift of thinking towards security of supply, as I've mentioned, and discussions on a strategic reserve of hydrogen after oil and gas will be probably next. So these discussions, the sectoral discussions, are part of the update of the National Hydrogen Strategy, which the government announced will be happening this year. But also more detailed ideas on infrastructure will be taken place. There is a proposal by the European operators of transmission pipeline systems. There's one proposal by the Germans, but I think it will be time now for a detailed concept for infrastructure, for gaseous hydrogen-based energy carriers, but also for non-gaseous energy carriers such as methanol. Now, finally, I think there will be a review of targets, and I think that is well received. But the next most important thing, and I will conclude with that, is to revise the strategy in a way that closes the gap between the political ambitions on the import of hydrogen and the actual projects, the physical flow of hydrogen that we will see. I'm personally very excited to see that come over the next few months, and also to work on the role that Turkey in particular can play in fulfilling these ambitions. Let me close with a big thank you from my side for listening so attentively to the presentation. We as DENA are jointly working with the German Chamber of Commerce very closely in establishing first projects in hydrogen, and are working very directly and interactively with industrial stakeholders active in the country. So feel free to reach out afterwards and engage in the dialogue. Thank you so much.